The PGA Tour's Florida swing begins this weekend. It is the Cognizant Classic in the Palm Beaches, and not a bad field for this week, despite the fact it is not a signature event. Got some big names in the field. We're going to break down them from both a betting and DFS perspective to get you ready for this week's Cognizant Classic. Welcome on into the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Tuesday by Brandon Gdula. Check out his work on Twitter. He is at Gdula13. He's on Blue Sky at Gdula, and find him over at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior managing editor. Brandon, Cognizant Classic coming up this week. How you doing today?
I'm good. Last week was not the strongest field, was still a pretty hectic tournament with a climactic conclusion. Hopefully we get a little bit of that again this week with, like you said, a field that is a bit better. We got three names inside the top 20. Well, if Billy Horschel's 20th, is he inside the top 20?
Yes.
Okay, so we got four names inside the top 20 in the official World Golf Rankings, teeing it up with Billy Horschel 20th, Sepp Straka 19th, Shane Lowry 18th, and Russell Henley 17th. So higher like skill level at the top this week compared to what we had last week. Hoping it's as fun coming down the stretch. And then, you mentioned Florida swing, Arnold Palmer next. Then we're on to something called the Players Championship. So I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
Getting into a fun stretch of golf. And you mentioned those four guys inside the top 20, also a future world number one and Taylor Pendrith in the field. So a lot of good names in this week's event. We're going to break down our thoughts on this from a betting perspective, go through favorite bets, both outrights, non-outrights, and the top DFS plays on FanDuel for this week. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel Research Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Search for FanDuel Research Podcast. Hit subscribe if you like what you hear. And it's a 5-star rating and review. We're, of course, here every Tuesday. Also, over on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. If you want to watch the Heat Check, you can check us out over there on the YouTube page. Also have some shorts from these shows going up on the shorts feed. So check out the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. Subscribe there. Leave us a thumbs up and turn on notifications to get notified as each of these shows go live each and every Tuesday. March is just around the corner, and college basketball is reaching its most exciting stretch of the season right now. New customers on FanDuel get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on everything from conference clashes to tournament upsets and even who is cutting down the nets. If you've been waiting to join FanDuel, there is no better time. The app is easy to use, and when you win, you'll get paid instantly. So visit FanDuel and get on the college hoops action before March takes over. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Chat, Connecticut. Visit MD Gambling Help in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit Gambling Helpline MA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's take a look now at the key stats note for this week's Cognizant Classic. It is at PGA National Resort, the Champion Course, which is 7,167 yards in a par 71. The 10th hole previously was a par 4. It is now a par 5, length in 20 yards, and now measures in at 550, so a very long hole there as well. 144 golfers are in the field. The top 65 plus ties will make the cut after the first two rounds for this week. So a lot of guys going to miss the cut in this one, which is noteworthy for your bets and your DFS lineups. Brandon, we know what to expect at PGA National. They've been here a bunch. What should we know about this course before filling out bet slips and filling out our lineups?
Yeah, long known as the Honda Classic, rebranded last year to the Cognizant Classic, and along with it came that shift in par, but overall not a massive change. still dealing with larger than average Bermuda greens, kind of average fairways. But basically, if you just take a look at the top down here, the GPS flyover, if you will, you'll see water, you'll see tight fairways, you'll see dog legs that just require some forced layups. So you can't necessarily just overpower PGA National necessarily. If you look at recent winners, that kind of tracks to Austin Eckroat last year, Chris Kirk, Sepp Straka, Matt Jones, Sungjae Im, the last 5 winners. Again, it's not that being long off the tee is not helpful at all, but it's not necessarily bomber's paradise. What you ultimately tend to find is that, kind of been saying this a little bit the last couple weeks, but the better, or I guess the best putter out of like the better ball striker probably has a good chance of getting it done this week. I will note that we did see a lower cut line last year, from what we typically see. But I will say that the winning score from Austin Eckroat, he won by 3 shots. Recent winning scores here have been 17 under, 14 under, 10, 12, and 6 under. Again, that 17 under coming by 3 shots. So we're not necessarily looking at like even par golf by any means, but it's also not specifically your kind of, well, I was going to call it run of the mill, but that doesn't necessarily, it's not fair. It's not a total birdie fest, and you got to make birdies, of course. Here, you got to make birdies anywhere. You need birdies, especially from a DFS standpoint. It's better to make a birdie and a bogey than 2 pars. Get more FanDuel points out of that. But for the most part, you kind of see some, like, again, Austin Eckroat, Chris Kirk, Sepp Straka, Matt Jones, sure, but it's like Sungjae Im, Keith Mitchell. These are like good golfers who aren't just random names like we saw last week whenever scores just go 20 under. So I do think there's a little bit of an emphasis on total form. So for me, what I think matters here is always number 1, strokes gained approach. For me, number 2 is strokes gained off the tee without really any emphasis on distance or accuracy. I'm just not including it. Strokes gained putting on Bermuda. And if you really want to get like a little bit granular, proximity from 125 to 200 yards, due to like the layups, for the most part, you're going to see just an elevated number of short wedges are going to be taken out of your hands. You're not going to have super long approaches. So if you want, you can look at that proximity from, I'd say, roughly 125 to 200.
Now, we always say just use the best golfers. I mean, we say it kind of tongue in cheek, but like, it is kind of what you want to do. Use the best golfers. I feel like that's especially true here where there's no real like standout stat. It's not emphasizing distance, not emphasizing accuracy. It's kind of like, I feel like we have full leeway to just kind of go with best quality of play, more so even than a lot of other courses. Would you agree with that assessment where that's always what we do in general? But I feel like this week especially, it seems more so just target the golfers you think will be in the best form entering this event.
Yeah, I mean, I actually kind of thought you were going to say there's no real standout golfer, which is also kind of true. A lot of solid numbers on the board, but that doesn't necessarily, for me, equate to a lot of value.
Mhm.
But with that being the case, like when I'm building DFS lineups on FanDuel, like, yeah, I have my favorites among the favorites, but I also kind of just think it's a decent week to go with a little bit more of a balanced build,
Sure.
from a DFS standpoint. And then from a betting standpoint, it's like, okay, we don't have any 10-1 favorites, 5-1 favorites, even like 12-1. Leading off is Shane Lowry, as Jim's pulling it up for those of you watching on YouTube. But Shane Lowry leads the way at 20-1. So whenever you get something like this, whenever you get a course where the winning score should probably be around 14, 15 under, I kind of feel like just leaning on total form is not the worst way to go, so long as that total form is not elevated a ton by wedge play, just because it's not the most impactful stat ever. I mean, just statistically, but also this week. So, yeah, I mean, might get a little bit boring, but this week I'm going to let total form do a lot of the tie breaking for me.
Very much same here. Now, you mentioned Shane Lowry being a guy who is the favorite this week, 20-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook, but also a guy who's played very well at this course in the past. So who are the course horses for you, Brandon, when you look at the guys who have done the best at PGA National in the past?
Yeah, so again, I like to look at the last 5 years of course data, not too much beyond that. If it's relevant, sometimes I'll just kind of throw it in, hint, hint, wink, wink for one of my win bets for the week. Has had some good form at the course in the past. But so I look at total form, so total strokes gained over the last 5 years, and that'll count for success, but also how often you've played here. For me, Shane Lowry is number one, and that's what you segued me into. But his salary is 11,800 on FanDuel. He is the favorite at 20-1 as of Tuesday afternoon on FanDuel Sportsbook, but he's finished 4th, 5th, 2nd the last 3 years, as well as 36th and 21st. In terms of his recent form, T39 at the Genesis with sort of average irons, which is kind of a deviation for him with how well he's been striking the ball. He was solo second at Pebble prior to that. But also another big name for this field in good form at this course, although he missed the cut last year, is Sepp Straka at 25-1. 28-1. Seems like he lengthened a bit, which
he was 25 yesterday and 28 this morning.
Yeah. So he missed the cut here last year, but was 5th. He won here the year before that, 33rd and 22nd. Missed the cut at the Genesis with awful irons, which again is kind of a big deviation from how he's been playing. So it's probably, we talk about this stuff a lot. One bad event is not really indicative of anything unless there's some sort of injury that cropped up that's leading to his number getting longer. I know he's won recently, so that's part of it as well, potentially, but Sepp Straka has played well here. Chris Kirk has also played well here, a name that we've not talked about in quite some time, it feels like. Chris Kirk, 28th, 1st, 7th, and 25th over the last 4 years, but the reason we haven't talked about him is the form is pretty bad. No top 20 since a T9 at the BMW Championship in August, which was a 50 golfer field, and the putter is ice cold for him right now. A golfer we have talked about recently is Sam Ryder. Salary is only 8,600. 21st, 9th, and 8th in his last 3 starts at this course. T59 at Mexico Open last week. T36 at the WM Phoenix Open prior to that. Russell Henley, next up on the list, kind of a co-favorite. 41st, 3rd, and 8th for Henley in recent years. Again, I don't like to look too far back, or I guess more specifically, I don't look back, but did win here in 2014, which I will use selfishly to prop up my guy, Russell Henley, but it is not even factored in here, and he's played pretty well here in his 3 starts over the last 5 years. Sungjae Im has a win here over the last 5 years, 5 years ago, but also 2 missed cuts. Form's really bad for Sungjae, relative to Sungjae levels. 3 straight weeks with negative approach of at least minus 0.87 per round, which ain't great. He has lost with approach in 4 of his last 5 measured events with the irons. Don't love to see that. Byung-Hoon Ahn also playing well here. And I'm going to skip over CT Pon because Daniel Berger also has 2 fourths here and a missed cut over the last 5 years. I know it, I'm kind of throwing out some names, but Daniel Berger, I'm just going to use FanDuel salary here to simplify it. Daniel Berger salary, 11.3. Ben On, 11K. Sungjae Im, 11.7. Henley's 11.5. Sepp Straka, 11.6. And Shane Lowry, 11.8. All kind of standing out in some form or fashion here in terms of how well they played. And just because I skipped over CT Pon, value play, 8,800, 28th, 16th, and 3rd over his last 3 starts over the last 4 years. Kind of a lot at the top to sift through. Who here kind of jumps out? Who do you want to talk about a little bit more?
So it's less who and more what I want to talk about, because I think that looking at the finishes of those guys, you mentioned the current or the course history section, a lot of them had miscuts at this event.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk a lot about how course history is not our main focus because things are volatile. A guy can have some miscuts and then the next year spring out to finish third. We've seen that a lot here specifically. It feels pretty volatile based on that, but also because I think just a large portion of the field just does miss the cut in general here, given that it's a 144 golfers, only top 65 plus ties make the cut. And maybe this is because I've got some guys I like this week who have missed a lot of cuts at this event, but I don't want that to bog me down too much. I don't want to worry too much about guys who may not have elite course history because, if we were talking about this event previously, maybe we wouldn't have had a guy, we wouldn't have had someone who was a standout in form at this course who eventually did go on to do very well. So I guess for me, it's more so I don't want to overweigh golfers with bad form at this course, given a lot of them in this course who I like who are in different form now they've been in for previous years, but also does seem like a pretty volatile event. Is that like an okay takeaway for you from the course history?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Austin Eckroat won last year, missed the cut in his debut. I know this is kind of backwards of what you're saying, but Sungjae Im won in 2020. I think he was like T52 in his debut before that. So basically, bad start, won, but he's got 2 missed cuts since then, 2 of the last 3 years, and it's also just partly indicative of like why we don't overweight course history because Chris Kirk, maybe he'll find something here, but I don't really want to tie things back to how someone played golf 5 years ago or longer. But I think it's a difficult course relative to par, all things considered. There's not like it's not like Scotty Scheffler's like, oh, he missed the cut twice in 3 years. Go ahead and fade him because he doesn't play well here. You don't have any names like that, really. There is some volatility, and I do think that both from a betting standpoint, but more easily from a DFS standpoint, game theory and differentiation is totally viable this week due to the fact that it is a little bit, volatile.
And we'll put more stock in current form as a result. So let's talk now about the form. Golfers entering with the best form for this week. Brandon, who stands out to you when you dig into the data as far as who comes in the hottest?
It's kind of like an awkward list because we're in that time frame. The field also isn't great, and but if you just look at the last 3 months, according to actually the last 5 events, according to my numbers here, Andrew Novak jumps out. 9,700 is his salary. He's been 3rd at Farmers, 13th at Pebble, missed the cut at Phoenix on the number. And then T13 at Genesis. Novak's a name that we kind of used to talk about and have not mentioned in quite a while. So it's nice to see that he's coming back to life in some form or fashion, just because he's a good ball striker whenever things are clicking. Haven't really seen it for a while, and it's good to kind of, I don't know, I like when golfers kind of go away and then kind of come back a little bit. It's a nice story. Even though there are blips on our radar, it's kind of cool to see. Grayson Sigg, T9 at Farmers, 32nd at the WM Phoenix Open, T17 at Mexico with good ball striking in them. Your guy, Christopher Ventura, 4 straight with positive approach in 2025. You like to see that. T4 at Farmers, T49 at the WM Phoenix Open, T25 at the Mexico Open. Jake Knapp kind of stands out here. 8,900 is his salary. 32nd at Farmers, 33rd at Pebble, 44th at the WM Phoenix Open, 17th at Genesis, and 25th at the Mexico Open. So kind of a decent number of golfers in the lower salaried range with good PGA Tour form right now. It's still a little bit counter to what I really want to what I am anticipating doing for the most part, where I want to go a little bit more balanced. It's easy to kind of cherry pick some of these better performers. But those are some of the best recent PGA performers. Some other names worth shouting out in terms of this more adjusted form from Data Golf over the last 3 months. Brian Campbell, of course, won last week. He's at a 1.38 strokes gained per round over the last 3 months. Alex Smalley, salary's 9,900, 1.3. And then Lee Hodges, $8,900 is his salary. He's also at a 1.3. We're looking at really small samples here. What I'm kind of my overall takeaway here is you could look at a lot of names and kind of convince yourself on them, but I'm not seeing a ton that stands out with like massive confidence. Is there sort of anyone in the lower salary tier with good form that you're kind of eyeing up?
Well, I have interest in kind of digging down a bit into the maybe the upper 7 range, but specifically more for me, like the low 8,000 range. I'm willing to go down there if I think there is a guy who has decent enough form that I can buy into in order to get access to the upper 9, low 10 range, which I would like to get to for this week. So 2 guys on your list, or 3 guys on your list who actually do check in that range. Grayson Sig, $8,300, Christopher Ventura, 79, and then Joel Damon, 79. Guys we saw pop up last week at least a bit. Ventura is someone I was on last week. Couldn't quite get the top 20, which I was very sad about, but did play pretty well. Damon, really good irons. He's had that for a while. It's always the putting with Damon that's a concern, but like he's had some pretty good rounds, especially over the weekend. Damon seemed to be in a pretty good groove. Are you willing to dip down into this range, the Sigs, the Venturas, the Damons, in order to get access to that 10K range for like your third golfer? I know that you mentioned going balanced. I'm kind of okay going with like a one, not extreme value play, but like more extreme than I typically go value play in order to get more balance in the rest of my lineup. I think that I'm okay with for this week. What about you?
I'm definitely okay with it. I'm not sure it's going to be the way that I sort of ultimately start building.
Mhm.
You can kind of toy with, Russell Henley's my top guy this week at 11.5 from a roster construction standpoint. You can start to you can go down to 95 with Nikolai Højgaard, Luke Clanton, and you still kind of have like plenty of room to play around with and still build a balanced lineup without taking too much of a swipe on guys with a lot more question marks than someone like a Luke Clanton might have. So that's still my preferred approach. But to answer your question, like, yeah, I'm fine with taking a swipe on one of these guys with lower salaries because of the event that it is. There's no guarantee. Top cut odds for me are not substantial, even at the top of the field. So if you have angles that you like, Jim's plugging in Chris Ventura here with Russell Henley. For 4 golfers, you're still above 10K on average. You love to see that. Makes things really flexible. So I'm totally fine with it if that's the route you want to go.
Yeah, I think that that's a route that I want to at least explore, just because it does give me the flexibility to get back up in there, and I can still I like Shane Lowry more than Henley, but like if I go Lowry plus Ventura, that's still 10,075 left. That's fine. I can use that for sure. So same route to a different outcome. I think that, or a different route to the same outcome is probably more so what I'm looking for there. But I think that I'm receptive to that this week, given that I don't think there's a huge gap between the upper 8,000 range and the low 8,000 range, high 7K range for this week. From a weather perspective, all looks pretty decent out in Florida for this week. No issues at all. Wind will not touch 10 miles per hour across the 4 days, at least based on weather underground right now. So we can just kind of proceed and go ahead as usual here. Let's dive in to our betting picks for this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Brandon, let's begin things with the outrights. And you look at the win odds at FanDuel Sportsbook. Who stands out to you as being a good value for this week?
The 2 names I have highlighted here did shift a little bit. One for the better, one for the worse. But I mentioned Russell Henley already. He was 22. He's now 25-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm totally on board with that because to me, Henley is the best player in the field, the best fit overall. I think he just checks pretty much every box I'm looking for. Does not have to be super long off the tee, which is great because he's not. He's a really accurate driver. He's a great Bermuda putter. I have him first in this field over the last 12 months in Bermuda putting. He's third in accuracy over the last 50 rounds, according to Data Golf, and he's already had success at this course. I mentioned him in our recent history section, but also a win here in 2014. A lot of top 25s, and right now, to me, the form is just kind of a little bit elevated compared to the other favorites. I have Henley 22nd in strokes gained per shot from 150 to 200 yards over the last 12 months, according to data from Data Golf. He's got positive approach play in 16 of his last 17 starts. And just if you kind of look at the math, a little bit of standard deviation stuff, he has the highest ceiling based on recent scoring trends. My model likes him. All those stats look good. I've been on Henley for a while, and I'm not really moving away from that this week. So Henley's my top guy. Any thoughts on Henley?
Yeah, I think the lengthening is really interesting because I'm kind of surprised he did lengthen personally, given there's no like standout here. And like he does fit what I'd want for this course pretty well. Where, like you said, we can de-emphasize distance, which means like if you look at the past 6 months, Henley is at negative 0.02 on off the tee play over at Data Golf. That'll get better. He'll probably gain strokes off the tee this week relative to the field, which is not always the case for him. And when you give him his irons, his short game with improved off the tee play, that's pretty intriguing. I like some guys of that same archetype a bit more. I'll talk about them in the non-outright section, but I think lengthening to 25 does at least open my eyes with Henley a bit for sure.
But without any true favorites, I think there's also a way to get back with sort of two co-favorites just to simplify it. But Taylor Pendrith was 30 at some point. He's been 28, then 30. Unfortunately, he's back to 28 here at the time that we're recording. So it could waver again, but it's nice to see that we're not alone in this. I'll just kind of spoil that you're on Taylor Pendrith as well, which seems inevitable. Although I say this is someone who's on Russell Henley pretty constantly as well, but he's just one of the most consistent ball strikers in the field this week. Again, basically just mathematically, and he's got other paths to upside especially with that putter. Like if you kind of look at the favorites this week, not everyone's a great Bermuda putter, but Pendrith does have good Bermuda splits. He's an 84th percentile putter from within 15 feet on tour since the start of last season, which is a really good sign because, we talked about like Henley lengthening. Pendrith did lengthen and then shortened again. But if you kind of look a little bit closer, like Pendrith's putter has not been good. He's, in 2 of his last 3 events, he's lost at least 0.79 strokes gained putting in his measured rounds at the Genesis and the Farmers, lost at Sony and the Century, but his off the tee play is great. A lot of that does have to do with his distance, but he's also accurate. He's a great iron player. And again, that long-term putting suggests that he's due for some regression. So only kind of real nitpick I have is a little bit of a lack of form at PGA National, but he's got a 25th, a 42nd, and a missed cut last year. So for me, Pendrith checks enough of the boxes where I want to get in there. And he's, to me, someone whose name value doesn't quite match up with what his talent level is right now.
You mentioned the putting, and that's the key thing for me with Pendrith, because when we first started talking about him over the summer, it was, okay, this guy's a bomber who can putt pretty well. Irons aren't great, but he was doing those two things really well. And now the irons are there. He's at 0.60 strokes gained per round the past 6 months on approach per Data Golf. That is right behind Russell Henley, right behind Shane Lowry, two of the best iron players in this field. And you give him that upside off the tee. He actually leads the field in strokes gained off the tee the past 6 months. And the expected regression with the putter, that's a really good formula. So if you give him the putting he had over the summer, he's got a lot of upside and a lot of juice. And I don't want to forget that Pendrith was that good. And like you said, 84th percentile from within 15 feet since the start of last year. That's a really good mark for a guy who is as good of a ball striker as he is. So I've been on Pendrith a lot recently. 28-1 in this field, not nearly enough to scare me off. And even the shortening from 30 to 28, I'm totally okay with that. So of the outrights in this field, Taylor Pendrith to me is pretty easily the guy I have the most interest in. Is it noteworthy to you at all that Pendrith's like downtick in putting came on the West Coast swing and now we're back on the East Coast, even though you said he's got pretty good Bermuda splits? Does that matter for you at all? Is that just me like trying to cope with the fact the putter has been less than ideal recently?
I don't while I cite surface splits pretty often, and I do think there's something to them, I think they're easy to overestimate
Yeah.
and overemphasize. If you're not, what I'd love for anyone out there listening is distance-based splits on different surfaces. I'd love to see putting from within 15 feet on the different surfaces. That'd be sick. So, but other than that, look, to me, from the research I've done, just give him more rounds. He's going to putt better. We've seen it. So I'm not really questioning the putter. If anything, I'm kind of questioning other names compared to Pendrith, but that's not enough to like scare me off. Trust me, I'm in on Pendrith. There's no moving off of that. But the other name I keep looking at here is Daniel Berger, who I do think is interesting. He's really skyrocketing. My problem is when I model things out, Daniel Berger not going to look great for a while because his numbers are bogged down. But we also have Sepp Straka also at 28-1. So I think what you're looking at here is, okay, Taylor Pendrith, we like him. We understand the case for him. There are other names, but to me still, if I'm, again, trust me, I'm in on Henley and Pendrith. You're only in on one outright. Is there anyone else who's like giving you pause or interest?
Yes, there were actually a lot of guys who gave me interest. You mentioned Berger. He actually leads the field in true strokes gained the past 3 months, like just straight up over at Data Golf. He in this year looks healthy, which is always the thing with Berger. He just looks healthy. The approach has been there the past couple of events, so I think that's pretty interesting. I'm not there. I think that Straka, he was 25, back up to 28. That's also interesting. So like the lengthening has been interesting. I love Shane Lowry, what he's been doing recently. I gave some thought to Lowry at 20. And then the final one I thought of is Denny McCarthy, who actually is 40 now. He lengthened too.
I liked Denny a bit too.
That I didn't realize he had lengthened. So like, yeah, there are a lot of guys I have interest in. I've only bet Pendrith so far, but like, I mean, now that they've lengthened, like the price matters a lot. And McCarthy was 35, he's now 40. That actually is a non-trivial difference. So I might talk myself into McCarthy outright. And I think that of the guys we discussed, if I do wind up biting on someone, it's most likely to be McCarthy, followed by likely Lowry at 20. I think those are the two I'd rank next up in my nibble list if I were to add from Pendrith.
Let's not call it that. No.
The nibble list?
Yeah, I don't like that.
I think you should. But who is highest for you, the guys you didn't get to besides Henley and Pendrith?
Yeah, so my point here was like there's a lot of guys who you can make a case for, have a little bit of interest in. For me, it would either be, I think it'd be Daniel Berger in case he's back.
Yeah, sure, that's fair. We like to talk about making assumptions and trying to be ahead of things. Maybe that's the case with Berger. Maybe we are getting ahead of getting back to the old Berger, and that would be intriguing for sure. So your outrights that we like right now, you've got Russell Henley at 25, Taylor Pendrith at 28, and I have Pendrith at 28 as well as my lone outright this week, but a lot of interest in Shane Lowry, a lot of interest, Denny McCarthy for me as well. What about the non-outrights? Who's standing out to you there right now?
I guess since everything just shuffled around, I should double check. I'm going with top 20 markets, so you can pull those up here. But I like Billy Horschel. I think he's an interesting name this week. Is he still plus 240?
250, slightly.
250, even better. Love that. He's missed 2 straight cuts. Don't love that as much. However, he's lost strokes from his short game, both putting and around the green in those 2 events, which is not what you really expect from Horschel. And he's gained an approach, which I'll take as a positive because there are just times where it seems like his ball striking comes and goes. And if it's here in the short game, just kind of struggled, I'll take that. He's gained with his irons in 5 straight measured events. He's 25th in strokes gained approach over his last 50 rounds now. He's got the Florida angle. He's a good Bermuda putter. 5 career top 20s here, was T9 here last year. And once again, kind of going back to the math, the ceiling number that he posts consistently is, I believe, 6th in the field, 5th. So I like that for Billy Horschel to finish top 20 at plus 250. And also someone who moved from 240 to plus 250 is Max Grazerman, who actually leads in that kind of ceiling metric that I took a look at, which basically takes your average output and your standard deviation in recent rounds. He's kind of really interesting. He's got 12 top 25 finishes in his last 25 starts. 18 of those were top 40s. He checks the box in terms of Bermuda putting. Overall ball striking is 25th. So that's your strokes gained off the tee and your strokes gained approach. He is 10th in combined short game. So that's your strokes gained around the green plus putting. So if you say, okay, he's top 25 in both ball striking and short game over the last 50 rounds, only one other golfer in this field can say that right now. And that's my favorite play of the week, which is Russell Henley. So why not get a little bit of arbitrage situation here with Grazerman? I think he's really interesting, and I wouldn't be opposed to him. I'm assuming he's still 50-1 outright, but I'm always good with the partial unit on an outright for golfers whose finishing positions. 99% of the time, I'm all right with it.
Yeah, I remember back in January, we were talking about a field where Grazerman and Pendrith were in the field. Grazerman actually had like a higher DFS salary than Pendrith did. It's like, okay, I can just take the discount into their Pendrith. But now it's like, okay, I can take the discount on Max Grazerman, who is plus 250 for a top 10. He did have that withdrawal at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, but came back at the WM Phoenix Open, 49th there, 24th at the Genesis, mostly via good putting, but the approach play is really good at Scottsdale. His off the tee play at the Genesis was good. So I don't really have any concerns with Grazerman post the withdrawal. I think that he's looking okay. So I had a lot of interest in him, and knowing that you're there too, that does get my attention. He's kind of archetype that I like a lot, where it's a guy who can have spike weeks with approach, good off the tee, good putter. That to me is a very fun archetype. So if I like Pendrith, I should be on Grazerman too. So I might dig in him a bit more as well. But I think upside markets, you mentioned the ceiling, top 10, outright, stuff like that might be enticing for him as well.
Yeah, just hasn't really put it all together. Mm-hmm. He's had weeks where he's been great off the tee, great approach, great putting. Just hasn't really put it all together, and that's led to some let's not forget about Max Grazerman.
Let's not forget about Max Grazerman. I like that as well. Okay, so Brandon is on Grazerman plus 250 for a top 20. Billy Horschel plus 250 as well. I've got one top 20. That's Lucas Glover, who is plus 260 at FanDuel Sportsbook for a top 20. Iron play has been inconsistent in January for Glover, kind of in the Sung Jae Im mold, but he did spike there at Pebble Beach, and he finished third there. So unlike Sung Jae, it's not a complete downturn for Glover. It is concerning given his age to see the irons not be quite as good, but we know the long-term approach play is awesome for Glover. So I don't want to get too freaked out due to a couple of poor events, especially given that, some of those were just a couple of rounds of data. Off the tee play and putting for Glover have been pretty encouraging. So plus 260 for a top 20, I think that's a totally fine mark for him. I am willing to go there with Glover. My favorite non-outright for this week, though, is going to be a top 10 bet on Denny McCarthy. He was plus 360, has since lengthened now out to 4-1. And I mentioned before being interested in McCarthy to win this event, but 4-1 for a top 10 is really fun, given that he's kind of in the Russell Henley mold where he benefits from a course where distance is not a requirement. And honestly, we talk about McCarthy as a putter all the time. Like, oh man, this guy's short game is so good, but the irons have been awesome recently for McCarthy. When you add that on to his short game and add that on to a course where he doesn't need to be a bomber off the tee, that's going to make Denny McCarthy really, really interesting. And I think increases upside. The history here from McCarthy is very bad. He's only made 2 cuts and 7 trips, but he was third in one of those. We have seen him spike at this course before. And again, like we said, it's a pretty volatile event. So I don't want course history to bog me down too much. And the form from McCarthy is really, really fun with the irons suddenly showing a lot of life. So of the non-outrights, Denny McCarthy 4-1 for a top 10 will be my favorite for this week. Is 4-1 a fair number for you, Brandon, with McCarthy lengthening you there?
I really like McCarthy. Almost got there in terms of the outright, but instead went with Pendrith just because the number was better at 30 whenever I really dug in. I think McCarthy was 35 at that
He
time.
was. Yeah.
Which to me is Pendrith. Now it's kind of different. So I still like Pendrith at 28. I'm not moving off of that. My only point is there's a lot of names that kind of are interesting because there's no real runaway favorite, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of talk yourself into names. You still need to like be disciplined. Don't just kind of get too many nibbles, to use your term. But McCarthy does stand out to me. I really wish the salary were a little bit lower than 10-8 because I just get access there as well. Mm-hmm. It's a fair number, but you make a good point about the approach. He's 34th over the last 50 rounds in approach, according to Data Golf among this field. He really could make a run at this thing. And McCarthy for, yes, the short game's great, like you said, but one of the things about him is if you kind of do sort by long-term form, he's always one of the better golfers in any field. He just might not be the best course fit. I have him sixth in total form, basically over the last rolling like 76 months, basically something like that. I want to get there in some form or fashion with McCarthy.
76 months? It's a very specific number. How 76?
Isn't that whatever a year and a half is in terms of, weeks, not months.
Oh, okay.
What's
I was trying to do the math, and I was like, 76 divided by 12 is not a round number.
Sorry, 78 weeks is what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think everyone knew that. Everyone knew what I was talking about.
Okay, 52 plus 26. Yeah. Okay,
we got 78 months. How many years is 78 months? 6.5 years.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. Man. That's not the sample. No, is
6.5 years is 2018. So I don't know what Denny McCarthy was doing back in 2018, but missing the cut at the Cognizant, the Honda back then, but potentially missing the cut back then. So at least there's that for him. But I'm on Denny McCarthy top 10, 4-1, and Lucas Glover top 20 at plus 260 for my non-outrights for this week. Let's take a look at the DFS side of things over at FanDuel.com for the Cognizant Classic. As mentioned, Shane Lowry, high salary this week at 11.8, followed by Sung Jim at 11.7, Sepp Straka 11.6, Russell Henley 11.5. You mentioned before that Russell Henley is your top guy at 11.5. Are you pretty firm in that, putting Henley at the top of your list among the studs?
Yep. Pretty firm. I like Lowry fine.
Sure.
Straka's got a great ceiling. Lowry, though, I know he's your guy. Or one of them. So my issue with Lowry is the putter's not as good as it kind of feels. He feels like a great putter, but he's like kind of not, which is interesting. He buries like a lot of long putts. He's a 41st percentile putter from within 15 feet. Since the start of last season, he's good on Bermuda, but not as nearly as good as Henley. His ball striking is really consistent, but it's kind of a matter of ceiling. And whenever we're talking about DFS, it matters a little tiny bit less, but you still want peak. Like Shane Lowry doesn't really feel like he's knocking on the door ever. Not that Russell Henley's kicking down the door either all the time, but Lowry never feels, I don't know. When's the last time he's really felt like he's going to go win something? And I love Shane Lowry.
Full Swing season 3 came out today, and him and Rory at the couple play event. So let's not totally write off Shane Lowry's ceiling. If he could have Rory McIlroy play alongside him this week, that sounds like ceiling to me.
Yeah, and like I get that.
I just keep thinking about the trailer of them partying together in a tent. So like I can't get that out of my head.
And like I understand he actually finished runner up to Rory at Pebble, but like it just feels
also he is like a major champion. Like let's not forget that part too.
All right, what are you hearing that I'm saying?
Because I think Shane Lowry has never tasted victory in his life and should probably retire.
He's got 2 PGA. I feel like he had more than 2 PGA Tour wins.
Yeah.
I guess is one of never mind. We can't go down this rabbit hole. I like Shane Lowry, but my point is I like Russell Henley more.
Yeah.
Because Lowry it feels better than it kind of is. Henley feels worse than it should be for how good everything is.
Yeah. I think that the way I view it is this. I have Lowry higher than I have Henley. But let's say I've got a lineup that I love and I am
Yeah.
$300 over. I'm willing to
Yeah.
jump down to Henley. So to
Yeah.
me, they're very similar. So that's not always the case where it's like I'd reconfigure elsewhere in my lineup to like make it work. Here I would configure at the top because like I don't think there's a huge gap between Lowry and Henley, whereas like the gap between like 96 and 93 is probably a bit larger for me. So I'd rather reconfigure up top. So yes, I prefer Shane Lowry, but I'm not pot committed to using him. It's like if we get to the turn on Thursday and you look at my bobblehead lineup against you, like Henley could be in there despite the fact I do prefer Shane Lowry.
Okay. I understand it.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got Lowry. You've got Henley. I'm not on Sung Jae at all. I don't mind Straka from a betting perspective, but I'm not as in for DFS at 11.6. Berger is interesting at 11.3. Definitely don't mind that, but I think I like Pendrith next on this list, I guess. And I think there's kind of a fall off from there outside of Denny McCarthy. Are you getting kind of a similar vibe from the guys below Henley for you?
Yep. It's basically, I like Berger. I prefer Pendrith just due to, if I use the word like safety, something like that. We talked about Pendrith in detail by now, but Berger might kind of be back to his old ways a little bit. And if that's the case, then that's dangerous because I don't know off the top of my head where he peaked in like the world rankings, but he's a really good golfer whenever he's healthy. But yeah, beyond that, not Min Woo for me, not Ben On, not Keith Mitchell, but Denny McCarthy's next. And then frankly, from there, it's Max Grazerman who jumps out to me. But honestly, at 10-4, don't love him as a DFS play. Prefer him in the betting markets this week. So I think I'm seeing the same thing as you.
Do you want to guess Daniel Berger's peak data golf rank? Not OWGR, but like data golf's rankings, their own world golf rankings. Do you want to guess what his peak is?
Fourth.
How did you know? Did you know this off the top of your head?
No, but like he's really good. He was really good. For
fourth specifically is very specific. Like that's
but I know he wasn't like I know he wasn't top 3, but I feel like you wouldn't have asked if it was like 9th.
But like fourth is specific.
It's fourth. It's fourth. Yes.
It's fourth. Yes. But
what do you have his OWGR number?
16th. At that same time. Well, 16th at that time. I think his peak OWGR is like 13th or so, somewhere in there. I think he ever got top 10. But and he's back up to 48th in data golf rankings, but like it's been a rapid ascent just because like, he had that injury. And so there's just no form for a long time in there. It takes a while to ramp back up. But like, yeah, he was fourth in 2021 at one point. So like, you're right. His ceiling is absurd if he's back to being fully healthy Daniel Berger again.
Yeah. So as much as I'd hate to take a wait and see approach on whenever they're telling me something, we also kind of had a little bit of a Justin Thomas. Hey man, he's really good again. And it never fully burned us for not jumping in with a win.
Well, it burned me for jumping in because I did jump in and it burned me a little bit. Like not like, because I had outrights. So I did lose money on it.
Yes. So like, it's not oh my gosh, we got to make sure we just, jump to the Berger train and don't consider anybody else. It's more a matter of he might be really close to sort of some peak ways again, which is again very fun for golfers who just every golfer I want them to like succeed. So
me too, especially if it's guys from injury, I want to see them come back to. So
yeah,
like Berger, like Pendrith, Henley, Lowry, the main guys I'm looking at up top. I like Denny McCarthy. I just think he's a better bet than he is a DFS play at 10H because like the proximity to Pendrith and to Berger and those guys is a bit too close. So I feel like I'll probably have Pendrith or Berger as like my number 2 guy almost every time. Are you kind of in the same boat?
I don't think so then because I don't really like a lot of value plays and I like the idea of bottoming out at 95. So I can't really do 2 names there. If I do, it might be like Grazerman. which is great to say now until I realize that I only have sort of one golfer shorter than 30-1 in a lineup. But if I'm ranking the top names, it's Henley 1, Pendrith 2. It might be at salary still from a DFS standpoint. Could be Berger 3 and then McCarthy 4.
All above Lowry.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I'll be more top heavy than you this week, which I'm fine with personally. I don't mind that, but I think that's an interesting approach for sure. So you're McCarthy at 10-8. You mentioned Graceman 10-4. I don't mind him. Honestly, this range is fine. I don't mind Michael Kim at 10-1. Think he's kind of interesting there too. Alex Smalley 99. So I don't think this range is too bad. What stands out to you around here?
Kurt Kitayama again, I think is interesting. Such a good ball striker. And again, you want to talk like ceiling, he's kind of got that. The Bermuda putting's not abysmal. He's kind of consistent with the putting, but what stands out to me is top 15 of both off the tee and approach. And again, you're kind of talking about, can you place it where you need to off the tee? Can you place it with the irons where you need it on these larger greens? And then can you roll in some putts? That's kind of what we're asking for. Not the best showing last week, unfortunately, but still, again, his putting splits from within 15 feet suggest that he should be a way better putter than he is. Maybe he just can't lag putt, and maybe that's all it is. But historically speaking, this is indicative of regression. So don't mind Kitayama. Don't mind Lucas Glover at 99. Prefer Billy Horschel at 98 among this sort of top 9K range. So a lot of names here, and hopefully it's becoming clear why I like the idea potentially of Henley with potentially 5 of these names. And then I feel pretty good about a lot of like everyone on my lineup.
Okay. Yep. I think that's interesting for sure. Again, I'll be very different than that, but it makes sense, the approach you're going with here, because there is a fall off after 96 probably or so. So I understand 95. Yeah, I understand wanting to avoid that range for sure. In this range, guys, I do like Michael Kim at 10-1. The approach play for him is really good, and he's like solid everywhere else. So if I get back up here, Kim would be my primary target. Also, don't mind Alex Smalley again, 99. Okay with that. I think Glover, I prefer to bet him than play him in DFS at 99, but not opposed there fully. Let's scroll down a bit more. Who stands out to you if you look at like the mid 9K range and lower?
Nikolai Højgaard and Luke Clanton at 95 apiece. Again, should probably begin to take shape why I'm saying the things that I'm saying about the way that I think my lineup construction is going to shake out. I just like these names. I like Nikolai Højgaard as a name better than Luke Clanton, which is no shade, but I like the profiles for these guys. They're both top 25 iron players over the last 50 rounds. There's some inconsistency with the other stats, which is fine, but you're also kind of getting that accounted for in the salary. And I do prefer Luke Clanton straight up. Like, want to make that clear if you're only getting to one of these names, but no real issues with Højgaard. And this is kind of where I see the drop off come in over someone like Christian Bezuidenhout, who we've talked about a lot over the years. Don't mind Harry Hall, but to me, this is where things kind of start to separate more. Any thoughts on these names for you?
Yeah, Eckroth's usually your guy. He is the defending champ here, 96. I have some interest in Eckroth. Any thoughts for you on him at this range?
It's fine. He's outside the top 50 in approach over the last 50 rounds. The putting for him from within 15 feet is 39th percentile. He is solid on Bermuda. It's fine. It just doesn't do enough to like jump off the page for me.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I have some interest there, but more interested in Harry Hall at 94. I think he was the next guy that kind of stood out to me. You mentioned him. I think the reason why you're probably more lukewarm is because it's done a lot with the short game. His irons have been not good the past 3 events. I'll just say not good. But the short game is really good. Off the tee play won't matter as much this week. And the irons before the past 3 events were looking really good. So I don't want to like totally jump off just because he had a couple of down events there. It could just be a blip for Hall, given that he was playing some really good golf before that, specifically with the irons. So he's lost in 3 straight. One of those was a multi-course event. One of those was the WM Phoenix Open. Didn't do well at the Mexico Open, which is concerning, but I still think there's enough there at 94 to have interest in Hall. The more I think about it, probably should be higher on Nikolai Højgaard, Luke Clan at 95, maybe Eckroat or Ricky Fowler at 96, but I think that Hall does enough to be on my list at 94 as well.
Yeah, it's not like I dislike him necessarily, but I prefer those other names. You'll also see probably Taylor Moore get talked about a bit. He's doing a lot with the wedges. His salary's 93. Irons are not great. I used to like him more like model wise. Like I like him. It's not a personal thing, but he's not on my radar as much as he used to be, just due to the fact that he's kind of proven himself to be a subpar iron player long term. I can't quite get there, but I'm not totally against it. I'd prefer Hall than Moore. But again, when I'm starting to ask these questions already, see a lot of red flags.
Yeah.
That idea of stopping lineups at Højgaard and Clanton and going up. Again, I'm not saying it's the only way to build a lineup.
Sure.
I'm not saying it's the only way I'm going to build a lineup, but might actually be my preferred way for once, which has not happened in quite some time.
Totally fair. So I'll go through my value plays because I know that I'll be the person down here more often. Then I'll ask you if there are value plays you're considering this week when you decide to vary up roster construction. First guy I like is shockingly cousin Seamus Power back on the menu for this week, specifically because the irons are ticking back up once again. He's still not putting well, but that's just Seamus Power, man. He can gain at times. I used Seamus Power so much over like a couple years ago that I get Google like, you get like Google News notifications on your phone. I get like Irish newspapers telling me about Seamus Power's performance at like certain events that I didn't use him at. Like that was the level there. I've not used him in a very long time, so I'm surprised by this, but I'm back in on Power on the PGA Tour this season. Cut 17th, 26th, or 36th, 24th. That's fine for a guy 9K in this event. So I like Seamus Power. Also, kind of in a Matt Kuchar at 83. I feel very guilty saying that, but like whatever. I don't know. He allows me to get back up into that range where I can get to a Max Grazerman, get to a Michael Kim, Alex Smalley up there. Irons for Kuchar have been good ever since the summer. Off the tee play doesn't matter here as much, so I think that's enough to make Cooch interesting. Mackenzie Hughes 86, I do like. Ryan Gerard 87, Kevin Roy 88. I'm okay with all those guys, but then also as mentioned, Christopher Ventura, maybe Joel Damon in the upper 7 range. I think all those guys are at least interesting to me for this week. Preferred value plays are Cooch at 83 and Seamus Power at 9,000, but Mackenzie Hughes, Ventura, Damon, at least on my list for this week. So I've got those value plays. Who are the value plays you would consider if you decide to vary your roster construction for this week?
Mackenzie Hughes probably number 1 at 86, and then Kuchar at 84 was actually a name that I waffled on, but putting back on the list.
Okay.
Pretty good iron player. Just I feel like he's going to benefit from courses that don't demand distance, which this doesn't. So I like that angle. And then of course my guy Andrew Putnam at 8,000. No real issues with his game. Kind of talked about him for a while now, being a solid iron player, solid enough short game to want to, not completely divest. But the second best iron player over the last 50 rounds and a good putter from within 15 feet. So never hate that for Putnam.
Could you go the bucket hat stack with Joel Damon and Joe Highsmith? Just go full bucket hat for the lineup this week?
Well, I think you need to find 4 more yet, but I like both those guys just fine.
Full-ish. We can go Harry Hall. He's got the old Bryson hat too, so we can go weird hats. We can include the no hats with Berger. We can make this work. Okay, who are your overall loves for DFS this week?
Russell Henley, Taylor Pendrith, Billy Horschel, and Luke Clanton.
Okay. I'm going to go Pendrith as a love. Really like Michael Kim, and I think I can get back there this week. Kaylee Grazerman too up there. And then probably Sheamus at 9K. Most of the other guys are kind of likes. Like Kuchar, like Harry Hall, like Lowry, but willing to go down to Henley if I need to. So pretty thin list of loves for me for this week. Okay, let's finish up with our win picks for this week. You are going to clinch the bobble hat within probably a couple weeks because I keep losing and I stink. So you get to pick. Do you want to go first and fourth for win picks or second and third?
I've been debating this. I think I have this filled out the way that it's going to go.
Okay.
So I think what behooves me is to go first and take Taylor Pendrith at 28.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I didn't think about that. We did overlap. Yeah. Okay. So you have Pendrith at 28. That means I have to pick two dudes. So I have not bet yet, which is not usually the case for win picks.
I think I have this figured out though.
I'm going McCarthy. You probably knew that one. Yeah.
Yep.
So Danny McCarthy at 40. That's the one I feel best about. And beyond that, I could just go with like the angle we've discussed. I don't think this is what you have down. I think you have me down for Lowry if I had to guess. Am I correct? Yeah. I'm going to go Berger at 28.
That was the caveat that it could have been.
Yeah. If I can't have my Pendrith at 28, I'm going to go Berger instead. Just because kind of like you said, he's got upside. We've seen this from Berger before. He's healthy, looking good again. So I'm willing to take swings on small samples, and I'm willing to trust a small sample if we've seen it before. We have seen it with Berger before. So I'll go with McCarthy 40, Berger 28. You've got Pendrith 28, and I'm going to assume Henley at 25.
Russell, don't call me Fallon Henley, baby. Let's go, Russ.
Fallon?
Yes. Former NXT Women's North American Champion.
Is that Russell Fallon or Fallon Henley?
It's Fallon Henley is the name. I had to.
Russell Fallon would be an interesting name for a women's wrestler, I guess, but I didn't think about that.
I think anything can happen.
Yeah. But whatever makes you happy. Okay. Any final thoughts for you for the Cognizant Classic, Brandon?
I think the real thing here is can kind of go any different number of ways. I think you're more along the lines of Shane Lowry, like Taylor Pendrith start to your lineup. Yep. I don't really want to have too many golfers who I feel like aren't going to make the cut, which I'm not saying that's what you're going for, but I understand. I just don't know that there's enough win equity at the top from these studs for the week. So again, one of those weeks where a lot of different ways to go, and that also applies to betting because there is no true favorite. You could go with a couple of the guys below, 40-1, or just take Lowry and Pepper beyond that, kind of whatever you want to do.
Yeah. And we, for DFS, always have to be malleable based on the slate, based on context. And you're doing that in being reactive and trying to stay above 95. So I think that overall approach is something we should do as DFS players always. So even though I'm not there personally, I think that that's a good exercise to undergo for sure. That is all that we have here for this week on the Heat Check. Back with you once again next Tuesday again. Golf season is heating up, so make sure you're tapped in both on the FanDuel Research Podcast feed, but also on the FanDuel Golf Betting YouTube page. Go there, subscribe, leave us a thumbs up, and make sure you turn on notifications to get notified each and every week as our podcast goes up. Brandon, people have questions for you on social media. Where can they find you there?
I'm on X at Gdula13, GDULA13, and on Blue Sky at Gdula.
And I am on X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets and your DFS lineups for the Cognizant Classic. We'll talk to you once again next week. This has been the Heat Check, a FanDuel Research podcast.